So, good morning, everybody, and welcome. Before we begin, can everybody hear me? Yep, I'm getting some nods. Excellent. So it's now at 10 a.m. and it's time for me to open day 7 of the hearing part of the examination of the Great Yarmouth Local Plan 2024 to 2041. For ease, I'll refer to it now as the plan. My name is Joanne Burston, and my colleague, as Annette introduced you to, was Mike Hayden. We are both planning inspectors and chartered town planners. We have been jointly appointed by the Secretary of State for Housing, Communities and Local Government to hold this examination into soundness and legal compliance of the plan and to produce a report of our conclusions and recommendations. For the benefit of those who are less familiar with local plan examinations, I should explain that I have a number of opening announcements to make. I will then explain our role as inspectors, the scope of the examination and the procedures to be followed in this hearing session. That should take around 15 minutes. I will then invite participants for this session to introduce themselves before commencing the discussion of HEM1&2. So this would be a good time to turn off any mobile devices or turn them to silent and make sure any notification alerts on your devices are muted. Could you also please mute yourself when you're not speaking and turn off your camera if you're not involved in the discussion. As this is a virtual event, I am well aware that there could be disruptions from dogs barking or deliveries. I myself have dogs, so I do apologise in advance if you hear them in the background. If anyone has any interruptions to their connection to the proceedings, we will then halt the proceedings while attempts are made for people to reconnect. If you need to get our attention during the discussion, then please use the raised hands function, which I think Annette has been through with you before the meetings commenced this morning. So the event today is being recorded and will be placed on the Council's website in the examination library. The programme officer for the examination is Annette. Annette works for us independently from the Council and she is responsible for all the administrative arrangements for the examination and for the hearing sessions. Outside the hearing sessions, any contact you make with us should be made through Annette. Our role as inspectors is to assess whether the plan satisfies the requirements of the 2004 Act and the relevant local plan regulations and whether it is sound. In order to be sound, the National Planning Policy Framework states that the plan should be positively prepared, justified, effective and consistent with national policy. There are 3 possible outcomes to the examination. The submitted plan is sound and no modifications are necessary, and that would be very unusual. The submitted plan is not sound, but could be made sound by changes, if necessary, following further work by the Council. Or finally, the submitted plan is not sound and could not be made so by changes. So talking about changes, I'd just like to say a few words. Once the plan has been submitted, there are only 2 ways in which changes can be made to it. Firstly, main modifications recommended by the inspectors, and secondly, additional modifications made by the Council on adoption. The Council has formally requested that we recommend any main modifications necessary to make the plan sound in its submission letter, which can be found at document A12 on the examination website. However, we can only recommend main modifications if they are necessary to resolve problems that would otherwise make the plan unsound. Main modifications are changes that would materially alter the plan or its policies. In the interests of fairness, they will need to be subject to consultation after the hearing sessions, and further sustainability appraisal work may also be needed. Additional modifications are changes which do not materially affect the policies of the plan. They are made by the Council on adoption and are sometimes referred to as minor modifications. Additional modifications do not fall within the scope of the examination, and it is the Council which is accountable for them. Generally, they involve factual updates and correction of typographical errors. The Council has already proposed a number of changes to the plan for us to consider as main modifications in the schedule of suggested main modifications, which can be found at document G33 in the examination website. However, we do need to stress that at this stage, the Council's suggested main modifications are just that, Our role is to assess whether the submitted plan is sound, and we will discuss the Council's suggested changes as we go along and whether they are necessary for soundness. So turning now to the hearing sessions. Our examination guidance note, document E6, outlines the procedures to be followed at the hearing sessions, the way in which written representations will be dealt with, the availability of information, and how we expect participants to conduct themselves during the sessions. We also circulated a guidance note on virtual hearings, which explains the specific procedures and protocols for virtual hearings. The hearing sessions will be in the form of a structured discussion, which Mr. Hayden will lead this morning, following the agenda, document E16, which is based on the matters, issues and questions already circulated. We do have supplementary questions to ask about the evidence, and the Council and the representatives have submitted. We will invite people to speak at particular times, but if you have something to contribute at the appropriate part of the discussion, please indicate your wish to speak by using the hand raised function button. There may be some questions on which we now have enough information, and so there may be little or no discussion on these. We have already carried out our site visits. However, if during the discussion today further matters are raised which require us to return to a site, we will do this unaccompanied unless we find we need to go onto private land. The examination will remain open after the hearing sessions have ended. However, at that stage, we will not accept any further representations or evidence unless we have specifically requested it. Does anyone have any questions about the procedures or programme for the hearing today? Nope. Okay. In that case, can I ask the participants for this morning's sessions to introduce themselves, starting firstly with the Council, please?
Good morning. My name is Nick Fountain. I'm the Strategic Planning Manager for the Borough Council.
Thank you, Mr. Fountain.
Good morning, I'm Sunny Raggett and I'm a planning officer with the council.
Thank you, Ms. Raggett.
Morning, my name is Sam Hubbard. I'm the Head of Planning at Great Yarmouth Borough Council.
Thank you, Mr. Hubbard. Okay, so now for the other participants for this morning's session, firstly, Mr. Smith.
Morning, everyone. I'm Paul Smith. I'm the Managing Director of the Strategic Land Group, and we are the land promoter working with Barbara Brown, the owner of site HEM1.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Ms. Foster.
Hello, I'm Tracy Foster. I'm a Hemsby resident. Thank
you very much. So this morning we're going to be talking about matter 5, which is the strategy for the rural areas, and that surrounds Hemsby. So this session will consider the policies for Hemsby as detailed in the previously circulated agenda. Sorry, Annette.
Sorry, Inspector, I was just going to mention Miss Roberts needs to say hello from the Water Alliance.
Oh, sorry, Miss Roberts.
Hi there, thank you, Annette. Hiya, my name is Ellie Roberts. I'm a Senior Sustainable Development Officer. I comment on planning and we do consenting on behalf of the internal drainage boards in the Broads and Waveney areas. So we have a somewhat interest in this site.
Okay, perhaps you could keep your camera on during the discussions as you're a participant.
Yeah,
Thank you. So I'd like to remind everybody taking part in the discussion that you should have provided all your evidence in the original representations, and the hearing sessions are not an opportunity to submit anything further. Any comments you make during the hearing sessions should therefore relate to points made in your original representation. We have read your original representation and hearing statements, so there'll be no need to repeat what you've already said. The purpose of this session is for us to seek clarification or further information on any outstanding questions we may have. So that's the formal openings and introductions to these hearing sessions this morning. I shall now hand over to my colleague, Mr. Hayden, to run through the questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Burston. Good morning, everyone. And what I want to do for those who are perhaps less familiar with how we've been working through things. So we have a number of supplementary questions to ask on policy HEM1, and then we'll move on to policy HEM2. I think most the participants, other than the council that are here this morning, are here really for policy HEM1, but we'll do it in that order. We will refer back to the questions we've asked in the MIQs just to kind of make sure everyone's on track with what it is that we want to know more information about. So we'll reference those questions and perhaps just read them out to remind people what they were. But that's the way we'll run things. Okay, so policy HEM1, land at Yarmouth Road. We asked a series of questions in our MIQs, questions 163 to 168. Just dealing with the first couple of questions. So question 163 was really about viability. What evidence is there that the site would be viably able to support 25% affordable housing, 42 rollback plots, and the cycle and footpath improvements that are listed in the policy, plus a sill payment. So we're grateful for the various responses we've had to that. We don't have any further questions on this particular issue. The reason being that we've discussed the issue of viability earlier in the examination hearing, particularly in relation to policy OSS 5, which is the strategic policy on development viability. We've discussed it also in relation to many of the site allocation policies, and we've noted that the local plan viability appraisal shows that greenfield typologies such as this site can viably support 25% affordable housing, a sill payment, and a limited level of Section 106 contributions up to £2,000 per unit, alongside the additional policy costs. So that's being theoretically tested in the viability appraisal. That is subject to some further work from the council, particularly in relation to the issue of external work. So there was a query raised in the first week of the hearing where we were discussing that policy as to whether sufficient allowance has been made for external works within the viability appraisals. The council is doing some more work on that, and we will be assessing that probably in writing as we go through. The council has also agreed to some further main modifications to policy OSS 5, really to ensure that the viability of individual schemes can be revisited at planning application stage if circumstances change. So from that perspective, we've discussed the overall issue. There are some changes to be made to the policy which will come out in the main modifications. The issue of 20% biodiversity net gain requirement in policy NAT 4 will be discussed subsequently in the hearing on the 6th of November. So we're not proposing. We appreciate that some parties have a concern about that, but we'll be discussing that issue in particular and the viability of that for the session on the 6th of November. So for those reasons, at this stage, we have no further questions on that question 163 about viability. Are there any general points that other participants wish to make at this stage on that issue? Bear in mind that we've read your representations. Okay, that's good. Okay, so question 164 then. Again, it was around viability, but the question was, would the scale of the sill receipt from around 112 market dwellings be sufficient to fund the improvements to secondary education, healthcare and library services infrastructure required to accommodate the development, and if not, should any of those be added to the list of planning obligations? So again, grateful for the responses we've had to that. Again, during the first week of the hearing, we discussed the issue of infrastructure and SIL receipts, or sorry, what infrastructure the SIL receipts would be used to fund, and whether there would be sufficient to pay for the additional school places, surgery space, and other community facilities required to support new housing development. Again, the council has agreed to provide some further evidence on this in the form of an infrastructure funding statement, which we're awaiting, and it may be that there's a need to come back to that later on in the hearing, but if not, we would deal with that in writing and any main modifications that are required in response to that. So at this stage, on that question, which is similar to one we've asked on a number of these site allocations, we're not proposing to discuss that further at this stage or to ask any further questions. So again, I don't want to deny people the opportunity to make a comment on that particular issue if they had something in mind. But again, we've read your representations and your hearing statements on that particular issue. So no further questions in follow up to question 164 at the moment. Does anyone wish to say anything on that? Okay, great. So question 165, and we do have some follow-up questions to ask on this, and I will bring different people in. So question 165 is, in criterion B of policy HEM1, is a 12-month period justified for the rollback plots to be on the market before they're released for other forms of development, given that some local planning authorities in the coastal change management area in Norfolk allow up to a 5-year period? So if we can just come to the council first, obviously grateful for your response to that question. It doesn't really deal with the comparison with other local planning authorities within the coastal change management area. Perhaps, I'm not sure who will speak on this, but perhaps you could just run through for us, what are the marketing periods allowed by other local authorities? And an example has been given of another authority in the coastal change management area, which allows up to a 5-year period. So why is the period allowed by Great Yarmouth so much shorter than that 5-year period? And what evidence do you have of the length of time it takes for plots to be taken up after going on the market? So appreciate there's three questions in one there, but really just give us a sense of how this 12-month period compares with other authorities, why 12 months compared to 5 years, and what evidence do you have of the length of time actually it takes for plots to be taken up? Who's going to speak on that?
Yeah, I can come in on that one.
Okay, that's very good. Thank you.
So we have proposed a 12-month marketing requirement, which we believe is consistent with the rest of the local plan, but specifically CLC5 also requires a 12-month marketing period, which we feel would provide sufficient opportunity for the plots to be taken up. And I just think it's important to note that policy CLC5 would permit proposals for the replacement and relocation of dwellings from within the CCMA, both within and outside of development limits where it conforms to the criterions outlined within that policy. So HEM1 is not the only opportunity for rollback provision through the local plan. And the 12-month marketing period, I think it's just to kind of strike that balance between not frustrating development by having an extensive marketing period.
Okay, but what evidence do you have of how long it takes for rollback plots to be taken up? Yeah, I've seen your hand, Mr. Hubbard. Did you want to come in at that point, or Ms. Raggett, are you going to answer?
Yeah, let's come in on this one. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
I think it's fair to say, I mean, locally in Great Yarmouth, we don't have any evidence of what the length of time would be needed for marketing for rollback plots to come forward, because it hasn't happened to date. There's not been a successful rollback scheme within the area. Your question started with in terms of the comparison to other areas. Locally, I'm only aware of the Waveney local plan down in what's now the East Suffolk district, and there was a site in the village of Raiden within that plan that allowed for rollback of seven plots for rollback off a scheme of around 200 odd homes. Yes, that allowed a 5-year period for marketing. But I think that I suppose a slight difference there, notwithstanding what Sunny's already said, is Raiden and Eastern Bavants in East Suffolk sit within the area of outstanding natural beauty, and there's really very, very limited opportunities to roll back those properties in Eastern Bavants to the edge of Raiden. So that's kind of that site allocation, I suppose you could consider to be the only hope, and in that particular locality, and as we said, suggested here, there's less constraints in terms of the areas around Hemsby and nearby Scratby to accommodate that, and therefore a slightly reduced marketing period may be more appropriate. I think we're very mindful, particularly within CLC5, we don't, if there is a particular demand for another use of land, such as affordable housing, there is an affordable housing need within Hemsby as evidenced in their neighbourhood plan and generally across the borough. We wouldn't want to frustrate exception sites coming forward for an overly long length of time because of this requirement for marketing.
Okay. Mr. Raggett, you referred to another policy which allows other opportunities for rollback. Could you just remind me where that is so I can just have a quick look at it now? Which policy was it?
Yeah, so that's policy CLC5.
CLC5, so just bear with me when we get there. So just talk me through that again. Now I have it in front of me. So proposals for the replacement and relocation of development from within the coastal change management area will be permitted both within and outside of development limits. For residential development, the location or replacement development is outside, provided it's outside the coastal change management area, obviously, that it's within and within, adjacent to, or very closely related to the built-up area within the borough, and replacement development would not result in a net adverse impact on landscape, townscape, or biodiversity of the area. On sites, and then at the bottom, yeah, the council may consider enabling development support relocation schemes. Yeah. On sites outside of but adjacent to the development limits of Hemsby and Scratby, development for purposes other than relocation of development at risk of coastal erosion will not be permitted unless it's demonstrated through a 12-month marketing period. So that's kind of doing in reverse. Yeah. Okay, so there is a general what you're trying to draw my attention to is that there is a general policy which supports rollback properties elsewhere. Although I guess it's particularly applicable to Scratby and Hemsby. But what you're saying is, although there's only this site allocation, there are other opportunities.
Yes, I think I would agree that that's our position. Yeah, that's
Okay. So yeah, Mr. Hubbard, you've explained the difference between this site and Raiden. Is Raiden really was the only opportunity, so hence it needed longer for those plots to be taken up. Yeah. but in this case, it's not as constrained around Hemsby, and because of CLC5, there are other opportunities. Is that essentially what you're saying is the difference here between the two, and why you think a longer period wouldn't be necessary?
Yeah, that is essentially the argument. I mean, it's fair to say that within the Waveney local plan as well, there is a similar kind of exception site approach like CLC5 for other sites, but the issue in Raiden is that there's just not as many opportunities to benefit from that because of the nature of the being surrounded by. I said the area of outstanding natural beauty is not called that anymore. It's called National Landscape, the Suffolk Coast and Heath National Landscape, and flood risk issues as well between Raiden and Southwold mean that there's very limited opportunity for growth around that particular village, even for the small number of plots that were required in that location.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Foster, I was just going to come to you just to talk about the 5-year period. So happy for you to respond on anything that you've heard. But why do you in particular, sorry, first of all, I understand you want to keep your camera off while you're speaking, which is fine. So just to make that clear to everyone else. Just tell us why you think a 5-year period is necessary. Do you have any evidence around this of the length of time that it takes for rollback plots to be taken up?
Well, hello. I'm not aware of the further details about Raiden, but it is cited as a good example of a rollback plot. And also, there were already 7 plots in that example with a much longer period of time. It is stated, I can't give you where, but it does say that there are limited options, land availability in Hemsby, and that's cited as a reason for this these 42 plots to be in Hemsby.
Mm.
And if it's such a small amount of time, I don't understand why you'd need so many plots when they're not needed, really. And also I understood that the rollback properties were to be well located to where they're coming from. So the idea is to have them close to where they're being rolled back from. So, and also because there's limited land availability, wouldn't it be a much better idea to have a longer period of time for those people to take up plots? Because although it's not part, I know it's not part of this consultation, but when you think of how long it would take people to being able to use those plots, 12 months is a very, very short period of time. And I will say this is a very contentious policy locally, and I do think that the community does need to, and the feelings of the community, like the well-being, does need to be considered as well. And I just think that putting that 12-month limit on it just makes it really, as a rollback site, unviable, because it's just too short a period to be of any real use for rollback, and too many plots within that time. Like, they're not needed in a year, are they? 42 plots are needed over the lifetime of the plan. So why would you have a 12-month limit on it? I don't understand the reasoning behind it.
Okay, no, that's a fair point. So I mean, the plan does say that 42 properties are at risk, obviously over the plan period. Well, it's actually up to 2055. Yeah, given that there are limited options for rollback properties in Hemsby, the policy requires 42 plots to be reserved. Just give us a sense. I think you were involved in the neighbourhood plan, Hemsby neighbourhood plan as well, Ms. Foster. Sure. I mean, does the neighbourhood plan say anything about rollback provision?
It was made very clear to us during the neighbourhood plan that the only involvement we could have in the policy was to name a site, nothing else.
Okay. In the neighbourhood plan, or in the local plan consultation? In
the neighbourhood plan, when we were preparing that, we were only allowed to name a site. We weren't to have any other policies regarding rollback.
And so the neighbourhood plan identifies a site, does it?
There was one site brought forward, but the parish council decided not to go ahead with it because the community was very opposed to it.
Okay, Do you know why the community is very opposed to it?
I think there's an overall feeling of a lack of detail around what rollback actually is, because no details have been given to residents and there's been no consultation on it.
So, just ask council, the 42 properties that are at risk, are they all in the vicinity of HEM1&2, or are they along the length of the coastal change management area within the borough? Yeah, Mr. Hubbard. Yeah.
So the 42 that fall within the 2055 line are just within HEM1&2.
Okay.
There are more properties within the 2055 line in the village of Scrapby to the south, not as many. It's fair to say since the plan was published, there's now been new, more updated coastal erosion mapping, which means that there's probably slightly more than the 40, but we haven't. I think it's probably in the region of around 50, but we're not absolutely certain on the exact numbers. And I think it's fair to say there's a lot of uncertainty with erosion over the period within the coastal change management area, which covers the 100-year line. We're looking at more like 100 properties, but you never know how quick the erosion is going to take place. You tend to have periods where erosion is quite rapid and then it slows down for a little bit. Certainly over recent years, it's been going through perhaps a bit more of a rapid phase, and that's certainly putting a lot more pressure locally in terms of trying to find solutions to resolve these issues. So yeah, the idea behind a rollback policy is to try and encourage rollback to occur before you get anywhere close to an emergency situation. So the rollback policies aren't just open to the benefit to take benefit of the rollback policy approach, whether that's in CLC 5 or within this. It's not limited to those that are just within the 2055 line. It could be wider than that. It could be the entire CCMA area, because you want to try and encourage people to relocate early before the issues of blight set in, and also we get anywhere close to an emergency situation.
Yeah. Why? Excuse me for being appearing a bit dim on this. Why would the policy be particularly contentious from your understanding of the community concerns over this?
I suppose it's quite a complicated matter in terms of thinking about how rollback could work, and I think Mrs. Foster makes an important point there. I think there is perhaps somewhat of a lack of understanding, and maybe we need to do a bit more to communicate in terms of when a scheme comes forward as to how it might actually work in practice. But there's a number of different models in how rollback could occur. I think there is sometimes some concern in the community that people might profit from this approach, and I've certainly heard those concerns raised elsewhere working on this. And there's always, again, could be concerns about a particular site, whether that's impact on the local landscape character or traffic impacts of a certain site. I think one of the sites that was looked at within the neighbourhood plan, which was discounted, I think had some flooding issues as well. So there could be some concern actually about the particular site rather than just rollback itself.
Okay. I mean, the point that Foster makes about the length of time over which rollback will be required, and the relatively speaking short period of time within which people would need to apply for a rollback plot. Why is a longer period of time not considered to be more suitable for people in those circumstances? Given that it could be 50, well, 30 to 100 years before their property might be affected. What difference would a 24-month or a 36-month period make overall to the viability of the site if it gave people a little bit more time to consider their position?
I think it's a really difficult one, really, in terms of where you draw the line. Clearly, what we don't want to do is to frustrate the ability, if there is no interest in this particular plot of land, to frustrate the ability for something like affordable housing to come forward on the site. But at the same time, yeah, we want to give people as much opportunity to be able to move to the site, but also provide them some incentive to move sooner rather than later, because I think that is important. We do want to encourage people to think more proactively about this, because rather than hanging to the last minute where unfortunately you get to a storm situation and an emergency situation. We need to try and avoid that. So yeah, I mean, in terms of, I suppose on this site, there wouldn't be a huge amount of harm, I don't believe, to viability from it being a bit longer, whether that was 18 months or 2 years. I think when you look at, you then lose some of the consistency you'd have with policy CLC5, because I don't think it would be as appropriate to require marketing of other land that's not allocated. So for example, given the need for affordable housing in Hemsby, should an exception site idea come forward on another plot of land outside of the development limits in Hemsby, it would seem unreasonable to hold that up for 18 months or 2 years in order to market that site for rollback under CLC5. But I suppose it's not absolutely essential that the two policies have to be consistent. They could be, you could have a slightly different approach on an allocated site, and yeah, I think I have to concede that there is, if it was 18 months or two years, I don't think that would be harmful. I suppose it's just how we would justify it, because it's very difficult. There's no easy evidence just to pull from to say that this is the appropriate marketing time. It needs to be long enough to gauge the interest, short enough to encourage people to move, and also short enough not to leave an empty area of land.
Yeah, no, I understand that. I've seen your hand, Mr. Smith. I'll bring you in shortly. Just one final question: what is required to effectively take up a plot? I mean, what is required from someone living in a property that may be affected by coastal erosion? What they need to do within that 12-month period to take up a plot?
Well, it's a 12-month marketing period. So the idea is that somebody could, the developer or somebody else could bring that land forward for another use if they can show over a period of 12 months there was no interest, nobody came forward to purchase a site, the site, or a single plot for that purpose. It doesn't mean that they have to have got planning permission within those 12 months. That could go on much longer. They just need to come forward and say, I want to purchase this particular plot and get an option or agreed sale. Now, it might be that it's not down to individual plot owners. It could be that an organisation such as the council could purchase a number of plots at risk and then seek to relocate them en masse and buy a chunk of the site. Indeed, the council at the moment has funding through the Environment Agency's Resilient Coasts programme to pilot a rollback scheme within Hemsby by purchasing land and trying to then facilitate the rollback of properties. It's not to say that this site would be the site that's chosen by for that pilot, but it could potentially be. There could be interest from private developers who may see this as an opportunity as well to collectively purchase properties. That hasn't happened to my knowledge anywhere else along the coast today. But the idea was, as if the public sector could show how it could work, the private sector then might be able to deliver this in the future and help enable that adaptation to coastal change.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Smith, and then I'll come back to Ms. Foster.
Yeah, thank you. Morning. A couple of points really, and I don't necessarily disagree, sorry, with anything that the local authority have said. But a couple of points that I think are helpful. Raiden has been mentioned a lot, and it being 7 rollback plots out of 500. And there is a point here around the continuity of development, that we're talking at Hemsby of 164 non-rollback plots. That will be built a lot more quickly than 493 non-rollback plots in Raiden. So, you know, with a 5-year marketing period, you would end up stopping development on the site to then go back at some future date. And that is always really difficult to do and costly to do. And it does create it would essentially turn it into 2 separate development projects rather than a single project with an element of it to be delivered as service plots for rollback purposes. The second point is that in talking about the 12-month period, that's just the active marketing period. You know, local residents in Hemsby, many of them will be well aware that this is potentially coming already. I know it's been covered by the BBC, for instance. So it isn't a secret that at some point these rollback plots will be marketed for sale. And, you know, there is certainly things that the local authority could do if and when the local plan is adopted to be publicising that actually these rollback plots will be coming. There'll be a planning application which will include rollback plots, which will be publicised. Then there'll be a period where a marketing strategy needs to be agreed with the council. So, you know, it could potentially be easily 18 months, 2 years off before that marketing period commences. So people have got a lot of time already to think about whether or not this is something that they want to do and whether it is suitable for them, so that they can move swiftly in that 12-month period. It isn't a 12-month window to realise it's a possibility, contemplate whether or not you wish to do it, and then take action. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does. I know. I understand that. Yeah. So just remind me what just trying to look at the housing trajectory, what your programme would be. So assume this site remains as an allocation as it stands. The plan were adopted, let's say, in April, May 2026. What would your programme be from there onwards for delivery?
Well, the trajectory that Mr. Davies, the surveyor representing the landowner, the trajectory that he confirmed to the local council is the same as their Regulation 19 trajectory, which is starting in 2028, 29, build out 2034, 35. To be honest, if it were me completing that today, you build that much more quickly.
Okay.
To slowly ramp up 10, 20, 30, I think, you know, you'd be getting 30 per year from 30 for each, at least 30 for each full year from the date planning permission was granted. So you're probably only talking 3 or 4 years to build out the 164 plots.
Yeah.
Especially with the affordable on top of that, which of course would be sold into a different market. It's normally 30 private dwellings plus then affordable on top of that in any given calendar year.
Yeah. Yeah. So at the moment, the trajectory shows house building starting in 2030, 31 and running through to 2036, 37. But sort of building up 10, 20, then 30 a year for 4 years and 14 at the end. So what are you saying you think a more realistic programme would be, you know, from let's say from adoption, timescale for getting a planning consent, discharging conditions, preparing the site, any infrastructure? What would you say would be a realistic timescale for house building to start?
Yeah, I think you could look at development starting in the financial year 27, 28 quite comfortably. And then you'd be looking at 30 to 35 per annum after that. And that's maths I can't do in my head, I'm afraid, to work out how many years it will be. But
yeah.
It's about 4 years, I think, isn't it?
It's starting 3 years earlier than is indicated in the trajectory.
Well, I'm looking at the delivery statement,
Yeah.
the housing
No,
deliverability statement. That's where I was basing my comparison off.
Yeah, and I think the council have just pushed it back in their assessment of the trajectory. So they pushed it back to start in 2031 on the basis of a timescale to get the site up and running. Okay, so let's say, you know, and that seems quite ambitious. I may say so. If the plan is only adopted in at the beginning of 26-27, it seems quite ambitious to got a planning consent, discharge conditions, prepared the site, and house building to start the following year. So that I'm not sure that's realistic. But let's say it would start then. You're talking about what, a 3 to 4 year build out period.
Yeah, I think it's nearer 4, isn't it? Because it's, if you said 35 a year, that's 140 over 4 years. So
yeah,
4 and a bit.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I take your point about 12 months from adoption being fast, but that I'm measuring it, if I may say so, sir, I'm measuring it from the point of submission of the application, which may not coincide with adoption necessarily.
So it may be that you're saying the application may well be in before April next year.
Could well be, yes.
Okay. 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 All right. I think that gives some context around the time period for marketing. So yeah, I hear what you say, that the marketing period is only one part of the sort of promotion of the rollback opportunity, and that there may well be a 12 to 18 month period from, I think you said, from the grant of planning consent, but before the marketing period would begin. Is that correct, or from the point of adoption before the marketing period would begin?
From the point of adoption, isn't it? Because once you've got planning consent, it will be a requirement post planning to agree that marketing strategy with a local authority, which will take a period of time.
Yeah.
And you wouldn't necessarily start the marketing on the day that strategy is agreed anyway, because it might depend on where you're up to with the build out.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. That's helpful. We'll come back to whether there's any room or justification for extending the length of the marketing period shortly. I'll come to you again, Miss Foster. Just in terms of what you've heard, anything further that you wanted to add?
Yeah, with what Mr. Smith just said, Raiden is actually 220 plots, so that kind of discounts the size of the site that he was referring to.
Not 400 then?
220 Raiden.
Okay, right.
So it's a similar size. And also in Barbara Brown's representation, she does say that one of the reasons she wants a 12-month period is so that it can go to market housing, which is not meant to be what's going to happen in the policy.
Well, we'll come on to that point.
Yeah, and then with what Sam was saying previously around that people might think there's some financial incentive, but the council have actually stated that the rollback plots in question would only really be a value of £3,000. And also, I do think there's some incentive to the council, and I know we're not meant to discuss the rollback because we weren't allowed to discuss this during the local plan consultations, the rollback aspect of it. But the rollback, I do think, is being pushed at the moment because of this Environment Agency funding that is available to the council. I know no one will speak about it, but that runs out in 2027. So I do think there's a financial incentive to the council to get this moving as quickly as possible. And I do think that the contentiousness of the site is due to the fact there hasn't been engagement around this. So there is more to it.
Yeah, yeah. So you're saying the EA funding, the opportunity for funding runs out in 2027?
That's right, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
that funding is for the council to enable rollback, and I do think
Yeah,
that's
no, I
why
understand that.
this is being pushed.
Yeah, no, I understand that.
Could I add one more
Okay.
thing?
Yes, please do. Yeah.
Yeah, I think everyone in Hemsby acknowledges that there's a need for a rollback policy because of the situation. I don't think everyone's just against it. It's just that if we're going to have this rollback policy, it needs to be as good as possible for the residents and the well-being of the community.
Yeah, yeah, no, I understand that. Yeah. Okay, just a couple of points of clarification then. Is it 400 plots or 220 in Raiden, which is correct? I've got two different opinions. I appreciate I can probably go and look at this, look at the plan, but what is it, Mr. Hubbard? Yes,
It's 220.
it is 220. So, Mr. Spear, that's you acknowledge that it's not 400. I'm not sure where that figure came from then.
No, I heard somebody else say that number earlier, sir. So repeat
Okay.
it. It wasn't. Yeah. So apologies that I got that wrong.
So it's a similar size scheme. Okay. Yeah. Okay. And the other was just, Mr. Hubbard, could you just explain the situation around the funding? So is there some pressure on the council to take this opportunity and access to funding? And is that one of the reasons why you're looking for a shorter marketing period? Just answer that point, please.
No, I mean, in terms of the funding that we've secured, although it's part of a Resilient Coast project that's been going back on I think since around about 2021, I think the funding was agreed. It's going back a few years.
Okay.
But the agreement that we've had from the Environment Agency to specifically fund a rollback scheme within Hemsby was only agreed in the spring of this year. So it was after we submitted the plan. But
Yeah.
Mrs. Foster is right. There is obviously some time constraints here. The Resilient Coast project does end in 2027. And if the council doesn't spend the money in that time, it will have to hand it back to government. So we've got we've got a small window to try and do something positive for Hemsby using that funding.
Okay.
But it's not to say that this site will be the site that the council, once we've rolled back, it needs to obviously keep its options open but this could be one opportunity that's looked at. But as I said, the project is still very in its early days. We don't so we've not identified the land as yet. We don't even have a project manager in place for it as yet. So it's too early really to kind of
Okay.
see exactly where that's going to go at this point in time.
So has the money got to be spent by when is it in 2027? It's the end of 2027.
It's the end of the financial, so March 2027. So in terms
it has to
of
be spent by then, does it?
It does, yeah. So the most amount of the money will be spent on purchasing the land to facilitate the rollback. So we've got so whilst we don't necessarily have to fully deliver the rollback scheme, would have at least had to have purchased the land in that time.
Okay. And is the funding sufficient to purchase all 42 plots?
No, it's not.
Okay.
It's we think it's about 30.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Okay. I think I'm gonna just pause my yeah, Miss Foster, your hand is up again. Yeah.
Sorry, I'll put it down.
Oh, okay. It's what we call a legacy hand. Okay. All right. A come back on that. When we finish discussing the policy, I'll just come back to whether the marketing period, whether it might be sensible to review the length of the marketing period and extend it further. So I appreciate there are some time constraints on that in terms of funding, in terms of the build out of the scheme, albeit the build out of the scheme would suggest that there's potential to have a slightly longer marketing period, but I am mindful of the fact that it once adopted, the publicity about the forthcoming rollback opportunity would start then, so a formal marketing period would kind of be added onto that. So I understand all that. So if you don't mind, there are some other aspects of the policy I want to discuss, and we'll come back to that at the end before we move on to HEM2. I do just want to move on then to talk about, and I've got a question for later on. I've got a question for you, Miss Roberts, about your representations, and then I've got a question for Ms. Foster at the end of the discussion on HEM1 about the design code. So we will come back to those points. But the other sort of key issue I wanted to talk about is our MIQ 166, where we've asked about the clarity of criterion B of the policy regarding alternative uses of the rollback plots. The rollback land if plots are not taken up during the 12-month marketing period or by the end of the 12-month marketing period. So I think, and thank you for your responses on that question, but I think we do find the policy framework is ambiguous on this. And if you bear with me, I'll just explain why. So criterion B states that the land should not be developed for market housing. So that's clear it's the second sentence. This land should not be developed for market housing. But after the 12-month period, other uses such as affordable housing would be considered. But in your answer, so it's the council, in your answer to our MIQ 166, you do say that the alternative uses are not limited to affordable housing. So appreciate affordable housing isn't as such, so it's an example. So not limited to affordable housing, but for other uses in line with policy CLC5. So if I then look at policy CLC5 in paragraph 1463, so the supporting text to policy CLC5, that says the marketing requirements and the requirements in policy CLC5 don't apply to HEM1. So, and I think you refer in your response, you refer to CLC5 as being clear, on types of uses that would be permitted if the rollback plots are not taken up. But actually it's clear that CLC5 doesn't apply to HEM1. So we go back to HEM1, and it's not entirely clear. It's clear from the policy that the land shouldn't be used to develop market housing, but it's not entirely clear on the range of alternative forms of residential development, let's say, that would be considered if the land didn't come forward. I think that's what's confusing. See, at the moment, criterion B says this land should not be developed this land should not be developed for other uses such as affordable housing unless marketing evidence is provided which demonstrates that the land has been marketed for the replacement of properties at risk in line with policy CLC5 over a sustained period of 12 months. And then the supporting text to CLC5 says that the above marketing requirements do not apply to policy HEM1, which has its own marketing requirements. So there are two particular reasons why it's not clear. So it's not clear on what the marketing requirements are, and it's not entirely clear on what the alternative uses would be, if not market housing. Can you just help on that? I don't know. Yeah. Ms. Raggett, thank you.
On that one. Thank you, Inspector. So yeah, I think we take the point in criterion B of the policy, there is a little bit of conflict there, in that there are two separate marketing requirements. So I think that we could take that away as an action to look at that and kind of provide more clarity on that point as a main modification. And then, so I think, and then in reference to other forms of uses that might be acceptable following the 12-month marketing period. I mean, policy HEM1 does make it quite clear that it won't revert to affordable, won't revert to market housing, sorry.
Yeah.
And then paragraph 6.68 sort of expands on that a little bit. But that it isn't just exclusive, it wouldn't just be limited to HOU3. So I think that it would have to be read in line with policy OSS3, which would set out circumstances whereby new development might be permitted outside of development limits, including where specific policies indicate that. So that might include, yeah, obviously, as we said, HOU3 affordable housing exception sites, but also policy HOU5 housing for older people, self-build residential development,
Okay.
and obviously it's quite an extensive list. So I think that's why we've tried not to almost provide a list of uses that might be acceptable following a marketing period. Otherwise, it would be quite an exhaustive list.
Yeah. The only thing we're referring to OSS3 is that effectively says development. The constraints in that policy don't apply where the site's an allocation. So in a sense, the site is an allocation. So that's the policy you look at to determine how it should be developed rather than OSS3. So to my mind, it's confusing to refer back to OSS3. It would make a lot more sense in this case to set out, so it's clear the rollback land shouldn't be developed for market housing, but I think it would make a lot more sense if it was set out more clearly either in the policy or in the policy and the supporting text what the alternatives would be without referring perhaps to OSS3. Accept HOU3 is an exception site policy. I think it would be better to set it out more clearly in the policy, because I've read the policy framework and I'm not actually clear what it's saying, having gone to the different policies. But I think you've acknowledged that perhaps that's another area from main modification. So agreed that needs a main mod to make clear the marketing arrangements. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we would agree that, yeah, a main modification is needed there to provide clarity. Additionally, we realised that we do need another main modification for point B, as it states that it will be 1.2 hectares of land will be made available to accommodate these rollback plots. But that's an incorrect figure that's been carried over from Reg 18, and there's been an uplift in that overall number.
Okay.
So we would also be making a modification just in reference to that.
Okay, so what should that figure be?
It should be 1.68.
Okay, and how is that worked out?
That's just over using the 25 dwellings per hectare density figure.
Okay. Okay, so and to site area. So you're suggesting that main modifications to the policy need to be made in respect of clarifying the marketing arrangements, clarifying the alternative forms of accommodation or residential development that would be acceptable, and also amending the site area for rollback properties. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mr. Smith, was there, I know you haven't got your hand up, was there anything you wanted to comment on in respect of those changes to the policy?
Yes, thank you. There's a couple of things really. I, like you, was a little bit confused with how the marketing provisions for alternative uses would operate. And because one of the challenges with this is actually we don't know how many of those 42 service plots it may apply to. So, you know, at one extreme, if it were to all 42, it's likely that that could be for a different use than if it were just a single one. If it was just one of the rollback plots left over, then, you know, self-build might be the most appropriate route forward for it. So I think, I do think it's important to have some flexibility in that policy to recognise that there are a whole range of outcomes here that, you know, none of us know what they're going to be at this stage. My second point was around this presumption that they shouldn't be developed for market housing, which I didn't really understand the rationale for that. And it references, as you pointed out, treating it as an exception site in accordance with policy HOU 3. But of course, as with OSS 3, that relates to sites outside of settlement limits. And this would be an active policy. HEM1 says this is allocated for approximately 206 dwellings. So I didn't really understand the rationale from a sort of a policy point of view, but also from a viability point of view. You know, delivering a serviced plot at the sort of price point that the rollback policy envisages, it probably would generate a loss for the developer that the open market dwellings would need to subsidise. Now, it's not going to be a huge loss because in pound notes terms, the cost of delivering a service plot isn't astronomical. It's road, sewers, service connections, so it's low tens of thousands, not big bucks. If you then build a dwelling on the site to be sold as an affordable house, affordable homes sell for less than construction costs. So you're actually increasing the loss that will be incurred by delivering it through that route, which makes it a really unattractive proposition for a developer, especially when you don't know that you're going to have to do that until later on in the development process, if that makes sense. We talked about the marketing period, and wherever you land on that marketing period, until that's ended, you don't know what tenure, potentially what route you're going to be selling these homes for, and therefore what the financial implications are. So you almost need to start again with the viability at that point. And I'm not convinced it would be viable to deliver all of those rollback plots as affordable housing. I said I know it says in the statement that if all 42 are affordable, that means that the number of plots on the site as a whole that will be affordable gets up to, it was 40 something %, wasn't it? So, and again, I know it probably wouldn't ever be all 42, but when the viability evidence from the council is for a much lower level of affordable housing being viable, that sort of seems important to me. So yes, there are other uses that might come in here, but if delivering more homes is considered to be a suitable alternative in the event that the rollback plots are not taken up, I don't understand why they shouldn't just be treated as in inverted commas, normal development with, the policy compliant level of affordable housing, the 25% level of affordable housing, and the remaining being marketed housing, so that there is some profit being generated to subsidise or to provide the necessary subsidy for the affordable homes. That makes sense. There's a bit of circularity in the rationale for it. So
I understand what you're saying. Yeah. Yeah, I think you said the equivalent would be 45% affordable housing if all 42 were to revert to affordable housing. So, okay, just wonder if does the council have any response to those the points made by Mr. Smith? That if it were all delivered as affordable housing, would it be viable? Yeah, Ms. Raggett.
Yeah, I'll just comment on that one. If this site were delivered under HEM1&2, that does permit an element of up to 50% market housing on the site to ensure that the development is viable. So we're not saying that it necessarily will be 100% affordable housing. That there is an opportunity to cross-subsidise in order to make that site viable. As
it's under policy, which policy? HEM1?
HEM1&2.
HEM1&2. Okay. I think this all needs to be made much clearer.
Yeah, I appreciate that. We can try and flesh that out with the modifications a bit more. I think I'll just let Sam come in, Mr. Hubbard.
Yeah.
So I think one of the issues with the approach suggested by Mr. Smith is that really, again, for rollback to be viable, then there needs to be a realistic expectation of land value for the provision of a rollback plot. And that's why generally rollback policies are done on an exceptions-based process, in that the land outside of development limits, which has no prospect of market housing, will be more affordable to purchase for things like affordable housing or rollback than it would otherwise be. So that's the same kind of philosophy we need to kind of put onto to this site in order for those rollback sites to be, those rollback plots to be affordable and actually be deliverable. If the backstop is just an open market development, notwithstanding that there would be a provision of 25% affordable housing off the back of that, that's still going to be that's going to mean that 1.6 hectares is now much more, has a much higher value than it otherwise would have if the backstop is just an exception site, which will generally only come forward probably with some grant sort of scenario. So and generally the other uses that you would permit outside of development limits, again, have a value that's nowhere near the level of what market housing would be. So again, it just helps kind of put a bit of a lid on what the value of that particular land would be to enable to facilitate rollback.
Yeah. No, likewise, I understand that as well. If policy HEM1&2 applied, I mean, if the policy simply made clear that, you know, in the instance that some or all of the rollback plots weren't taken up, then the land would be built out in accordance with policy HEM1&2. Would that not then make more sense? So it would effectively be an affordable housing exception site, and there may be a viability argument to allow some market housing to deliver the affordable housing. Would that not provide greater clarity? And I've seen your hand, Mr. Smith. I'll come to you in just a moment, but just interested in the council's answer to that.
I think the thing is, we're not insisting that development take place on this 1.68 hectares of land. It's prioritising that land, making it available for rollback. Should the rollback plots not come forward, then there's a range of things that land could come forward for, but we're not insisting it comes forward. So I think it's going to be quite crucial when this site is designed where that area of land is, so it doesn't create an issue longer term in terms of having an undeveloped piece of land. But when the policy is not insisting that the land gets developed for affordable housing or tourism or whatever else. It's just saying it should be prioritised essentially for rollback. That's why we make it available for rollback, for market it for at least 12 months, and then if there's no uptake, the developer there has a range of options which they could potentially use that site for, similar to how they could use any other site outside of the development limits.
Okay, so what are those range of options? I think that's where there's a lack of clarity. And I'm even having listened to the discussion now, I'm not clear what the range of options are. So affordable housing would be one.
So I think it comes back to what those exceptions that we've made to policy, as Ms. Raggett pointed out earlier, so those exceptions that we've already made to policy OSS 3, which there are a number, but generally all relatively low value land uses. Well, I mean, some of them clearly wouldn't be appropriate on a site like this, in terms of some of the exceptions in the plan around employment development and the like. But but I think the takeaway is, as Ms. Raggett suggested, I think we'll take this away and reflect upon it, perhaps be a bit more clear on those uses that are exceptions to OSS 3, which would be appropriate on this site.
Okay. Mr. Smith.
Thank you. Just a few small points, really, just in terms of what the council have said, just to clarify what I was trying to explain, because I think there could be some slight misunderstanding there. I mean, firstly, policy HOU 3 does talk about having some market homes being available to be delivered, but because policy HEM1 explicitly states the land should not be developed for market housing, so that there's one of those conflicts there that we've picked up on.
Yeah.
In terms of Mr. Hubbard's comments about land value, my point is, it isn't that affordable homes, 100% affordable homes, wouldn't be viable because of the land value associated with it. It's that the price that a housing association will pay for an affordable dwelling is typically less than the construction cost. So even if the land value is set at nil, there is a loss being crystallised there. And in pound notes terms, that is bigger than the loss from just delivering a service plot. And that's the challenge that the policy needs to work through and make sure that what I don't want to happen is that we end up with it where the policy, with the best intentions, but inadvertently means that any of those rollback plots which aren't left end up not being developed. And thirdly, what was interesting, the way that the local authority talked about it, I think there are two assumptions that underpinned it. First is that these 42 service rollback plots will be in one area of the site, and they may well be, but in design terms, and again thinking about some of the marketing and the delivery provisions of it, it might make more sense to have them broken up into smaller chunks of rollback plots spread throughout the development, which has an impact on if those areas are then never developed. But in any event, because they are to be serviced plots, a lot of the roads and sewers and infrastructure is going to be in at the point when the marketing period is completed. So the range of alternative uses for that land isn't necessarily as broad as all of that. It probably does end up with something that's a residential use or very much akin to a residential use because of the way the rest of the development has been designed, how they may be distributed within it, and what infrastructure has already been delivered. So I think we just need to, like you said, it's really complicated, and it just needs a bit of thought, I think, to make sure that it does actually achieve what it's intended to achieve.
Yeah. Okay. Ms. Foster, is there anything more you want to say on those points?
Yes. This is what my queries are around the policies, because the council, they need to have a rollback policy because that's in keeping with the NPPF. So if this is a rollback policy, which it supposedly is, it needs to be clarified that that's what those plots are for. Now, clearly, from the discussions that are taking place, there's too many plots just for rollback, and the period of time is too short, because what this has led to, and was one of my queries, is that actually these plots are being thought of as market housing by Mrs. Brown. And I think I think it's really important that the rollback plots are delivered. So there should be a relevant number of rollback plots, which clearly over the lifetime of the plan is 42, but there's too many for a 12-month period. So it needs to be a lot less plots. And there does need to be an extension in time. And I think that's being made clear by all these conversations.
Yeah. No, I understand that. Yeah, just come back to the number of plots then. Given the length of time over which these, I appreciate, and don't want to go back over the conversation we've had earlier, but I appreciate that there is a desire on the council's part to encourage people whose properties are potentially at risk of coastal erosion at some point during the plan period to come forward now. But it's not entirely clear whether all 42 plots need to be taken up within the plan period, and that's if it's 42 over a period up to 2055, whether quite so many rollback plots are required at this stage. So yeah, perhaps you could just, I don't know who would respond, but just on the council's behalf, just explain, whether all 42 need to be included. Well, all of the land needs to be included at this stage in this plan for rollback plots, or whether in fact it should be done in 2 stages, and further rollback plots considered in the next review of plan. Mr. Hubbard, yeah.
I think it's fair to say, like, the time frame up to 2055, as I've already said, there's a bit of uncertainty around that. And it could be that there's more. I mean, the latest, as I said earlier, the latest coastal erosion risk forecast suggests there's more than 42 going to be at risk in the period of up to 2055. I don't think we want to amend the number to reflect that as such. I think the SNP is still the policy document for this area, so 42 seems to be the sensible number to use. If we could encourage all 42 to move today, that would be a benefit to Hemsby, because already for those people in the 2055 zone, they're probably going to be struggling to get insurance. They're probably not going to want to invest significant sums of money into their properties, and you will start to get those issues of blight.
Yeah,
and
okay. You made that point.
Yeah, so it is. I mean, we could have taken a view. Actually, let's try and find enough land now within this plan period to deal with all of the properties that within the 100-year line, because it makes sense to be as proactive as possible. But given the scale, it wasn't seen as achievable right now. We'll have to probably look at that through the next local plan review.
So you said there was an increase in the number of rollback plots identified by the latest coastal management data. Yeah, the erosion data. So potentially up to 100 plots, I think you said. So
well, that's up to 100 over the 100-year period. I suggest the latest erosion figures for the 2055 line gone up to now around a 50 figure rather than the 42. So it's getting worse, not better in terms of the latest forecast. But I would just caveat, there's so much uncertainty around that. It could be more, it could be less, but I think on the basis of the scale of the site that we're allocating now, it would make sense to try and at least deliver the ones up to 2050, or give the opportunity to deliver rollback for those at risk up to 2055.
Fine. Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Smith. Final point, I think, on this.
Yeah. Okay. And only a really brief one. Look, given the nature of the issue here, I have no issue with 42 rollback plots on that site, and I know Mrs. Brown doesn't either. You don't get you don't get more than you ask for, do you? So let's maximise the opportunity. The key thing for me is getting that cascade mechanism, if I can call it that, correct, so that something can happen with that land in the event that not all 42 are taken up, which may not be the case. You know, we may be talking about something which never happens anyway, because they're all bought.
Okay, thank you. I think we'll come back to you on the marketing period, but I think it's very clear there that there needs to be some review of the policy in respect of the clarity in criterion B about the alternative uses if all 42 are not taken up. So I think we'll ask the council to take that away and give some thought to that and come back to us with a suggested alternative form of words, which would then go into the main modifications. I think as well as that, one thing I didn't touch on, but I can just say is I think it needs some clarity as to whether the guidance on rollback and relocation contained in the SPD would apply within HEM1. So it wasn't entirely clear from your response to our MIQ 167 as to whether that would apply, but I'm assuming it would. But it would make sense for that to be clarified in the policy as well. Yeah.
Yeah, we would agree that it would apply, and we'd be happy to
make that clear.
Modification to put that in there. Yeah.
Make that clear. Okay. I'm conscious it's nearly 25 past 11. I've just got two questions I think that we should be able to deal with reasonably quickly. One is to yourself, Miss Roberts, just in respect of your representation. So if we could just deal with that. We've noted your representations promoting the use of sustainable drainage to avoid surface water runoff into the Broads internal drainage district. Presumably you've seen policy CLC2 of the plan on flood risk, which requires the use of sustainable drainage systems on all major development, and also policy CLC3 on foul drainage, which requires the surface water disposal hierarchy to be demonstrated in all new developments. Are you content that those two policies provide the necessary development management safeguards that you're concerned about?
Yes, thank you for your question. Yeah, I'd agree those policies do cover it. Our kind of form of commenting usually will take each site which might be of relevance and we'll give our standing advice. So whether that's covered in the plan or not. So just to cover all bases. So yeah, got no issue with the plan as is.
With that, and I think in terms of flood risk, those policies are referred to in the supporting text. So and what we've asked for as a generic main modification to all of the site allocation policies is where things like requirements for flood risk and sustainable drainage are referred to in the supporting text. If it's a policy requirement, it should be, and it's not currently in the policy, it should be added into the policy. So we had that discussion last week or the week before. So yeah, okay.
That sounds good to me. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, that's good to know. Yeah. And just coming to yourself, Ms. Foster, if I can, in your representations, you've asked that the HEMSB neighbourhood design guide should be considered alongside the borough-wide design guide, design code, sorry. The HEMSB neighbourhood design code should be considered alongside the borough-wide design code. And presumably that's in criterion C of the policy that you're referring to. So where it makes a specific reference to criterion DDR1 of the design code. So I had a quick look at the neighbourhood plan on this. So policy 3 of the neighbourhood plan already requires development in HEMSB to have regard to the design codes. And given that the HEMSB neighbourhood plan is part of the development plan, why do you think it's necessary for the local plan to duplicate that policy requirement? Is it not covered adequately in the neighbourhood plan, which when any application on the site is determined would have to be taken into account?
Well, recently the design code, HEM2's design code, hasn't been considered in applications. I've given you one example of that. And also in GYBC design code, it does state that our neighbourhood plan should take precedence over the design code, over Great Yarmouth Borough Council design code, yet theirs is mentioned throughout the policy and ours isn't referred to, even though ours should take precedence.
Yeah, okay, and you're saying that's stated in the design code?
In Great Yarmouth Borough Council design code 1.2 status.
So
a made neighbourhood plan will take precedence over this design code should there be a conflict.
Yeah.
So it's just the point that Great Yarmouth Borough Council's design code is referenced throughout. There has been ambiguity about including our design code in recent planning applications.
Yeah.
And so it makes sense to me that our design code would also be referenced in this policy.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. What does the council say to that? Yeah, Mr. Poughton.
Thank you, Inspector. Yes, it's not something that we'd want to specifically refer to within the policy. I think, as you stated, the design, the HEMSB neighbourhood design code is referenced within their neighbourhood plan to have regard to it, and that's something that would apply where relevant, where planning applications come forwards. I think one of the important things to understand is that with the design codes, and this happened when the neighbourhood plan was going through its examination process, there were some fundamental concerns with aspects of that design code which could not be updated because it was externally prepared. Now, as part of that examination process, the examiner made a modification or suggested modification to have regard to that design code in policy 3 of the neighbourhood plan. So that was a deliberate aspect there. So I don't think there's any need for our local plan to specifically refer to either the neighbourhood plan or the design codes, which it would have regard to as part of the development plan as a whole.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Yeah, Ms. Foster, I appreciate your lack of confidence in appreciate you're not entirely confident that design code will be taken into account, but I think the framework is pretty clear that plans shouldn't duplicate policies in other plans. So you know, it's clear to us that you know, if there's a neighbourhood plan with a policy that says account should be taken of the neighbourhood design code, then you know, that policy is already in place, doesn't need to be replicated in each relevant policy in the local plan. So I think we're fairly clear that that's not something that would be necessary for soundness in this case. Happy if you want to say anything further on that, though.
No, that's fine. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, appreciate we haven't talked about policy HEM2 yet, but I'm proposing we have a short break before we do that. It may well be that there are some participants who don't feel they need to stay around for policy HEM2. Happy for you to depart at this point. But yeah, I'm suggesting we have, well, it's 11:34 on my screen at the moment. So if we break now and come back at 10 to 12, and we'll deal with HEM2. Yes, Annette.
Any participants that are staying, if you could just turn your camera and microphone off, but not leave the session itself, because we'll just come in straight to it after the break. Obviously, if you are leaving the session now, please do so. But for those who are coming back, just do that. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Is that to anybody who is leaving now? Thank you for your participation in the discussion. As I say, we will come back to the council in respect of the marketing period. I just need to give some further thought to that and talk to my colleague about that. But I think we're fairly clear on the other areas of modification. So those will be recorded in the action list that the council are preparing, and that will be published after the hearings have closed. So is that okay for everyone?
Thank you, everyone. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Miss Foster. Thank you. Okay, so we'll turn our cameras off and mute our microphones, come back at 10 to 12. Thank you. Okay. Hi, Annette.
Hi, thank you. It was just to confirm that the three other parties have now left the meeting because all of their comments were on HEM1. So it's just yourselves and the council,
Okay.
but we're on the same Teams record. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Actually, I think we'll probably deal with HEM2 quite quickly. So it's the beach tourism area. We asked question 169 about the evidence to justify the threshold 200 square meters, but we did discuss that last week. So I think we're content with the discussion that took place last week and satisfied with the evidence in the retail studies to justify the 200 square meter threshold. So no further questions on the threshold. Turning to our question MIQ 170. So we've asked is criterion C1 of the, or CI of the policy justified in seeking to limit retail use within the Hemsby beach tourism area to the sale of tourism-based comparison goods, and is such a distinction enforceable in planning terms under paragraph 3. So again, of the use class disorder. Again, we're grateful for your response to that. So yeah, I think we recognise the importance of trying to protect the distinctive tourist facilities and character of Hemsby Beach, and also the primary retail role of Hemsby local centre. So I think we recognise the need to do something about that. I think it's just similar to the discussion we had last week on the use of conditions to restrict the use of conditions to restrict changes of use can be applied where planning permission is required for new stores or changes of use to Class E uses, but not to existing Class E uses. So similar to that discussion, premises that were already in Class E use have permitted development rights to change to other uses within Class E. So I think it's just making that distinction clear in the policy. Just wondered if the council had a view at this stage, but if not, is happy to take the wording of that part of the policy away and just review that.
Yeah, I think we'd be happy to review that in line with the kind of discussions that we had on retail policies last week.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I think I understand that it's perfectly reasonable for the policy to say that tourist facilities in this area will, in criterion C1, provide for tourism-based comparison goods retail shopping. Fine to encourage that, but in practice, very difficult to enforce that, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that we would agree that we're trying to encourage those uses to sort of ensure the vitality of that tourist area rather than being able to discourage other uses.
Enforce it, yeah. I think it's where there's a change of use. I think it's recognising in the policy, isn't it, that certain changes of use within Class E already have permitted development rights, but that potentially you would use conditions to seek to control new Class E uses to ensure they continue to be retail uses rather than other forms of use outside of I think it's classes E1 to 3, isn't it? So okay, that's fine. So we'll leave that with you to have a look. Okay, that's all the questions we had on HEM2. Is it worth us just quickly going over the actions from HEM1 and HEM2 before we decide when to talk about the remaining policies. So yeah, perhaps just look to my colleague Joanne, sorry, Miss Burston, my colleague, to help with some of these. I think we had a very lengthy discussion, didn't we, on HEM1, particularly around the marketing period and yeah, section criterion B, didn't we, on how clear the clarity in the policy over alternative uses. It was a very helpful discussion, actually. I think we agreed that the council would undertake a main modification to criterion B, but that you'll take that away and give some thoughts to how that can be clearer on the alternative uses. As is often the case with hearings, on first reading and first examination, yeah, it's not entirely apparent with things like this quite how complicated and difficult the balance is. And I think the discussion helped us to understand how tricky it is to strike the right balance, and that the council is doing the right thing in taking a proactive approach, rather than simply leaving it to exception sites, which I think is the alternative approach, no doubt. Trying to make use of the funding that's available, but also trying not to try to maximise the potential number of rollback plots that could be secured at this stage, making use of this one allocation, but also not not stymieing the delivery of the rest of the site as a market housing opportunity. So I think we understand that. I think we just found it confusing to understand which policy to go to. Is it CLC5? Is it OSS3? And whilst that may be clear in the council's mind about how you would approach that, I think it just needs to be set out more clearly in the policy as to how you'd approach that. So yeah, I think it was a helpful discussion in giving us a better understanding of that. The marketing period, we didn't come back to you on during the hearing session. I think we had a brief chat about this between ourselves after we in the pause between these two parts of the session. I think it's our view that the marketing period needs to be longer, but clearly not as long as 5 years. I think we're, yeah, and I think we recognise that there will be a period of time after the adoption of the plan where the policy is adopted. It will be clear to, there's an opportunity for publicity around this at adoption, let's say, so that residents who are potentially affected would be aware of it before the formal marketing period begins. But we think the marketing period probably needs to be longer, taking into account the trajectory for the delivery of the site. There's room for it to be longer to allow people more time to make up their minds. So yeah, I think again, perhaps the council can just give some further thought to that. I think we're happy for you to come back to us with I don't know whether a note on how that could be approached, that perhaps could sit alongside any main modification to the policy. So when the main mods go out for consultation, there would be a note there that would explain the reason for the changes and the approach being taken. It would provide some substance to enable Strategic Land and Miss Foster to sort of respond. How does that sound? Please feel free to unmute your all three of you. Please feel free to unmute your microphones. Yeah.
Okay.
And speak. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, just in line with conversations, I think that a note would be useful to kind of sit alongside that, and we'd definitely be open to doing that and reviewing the marketing requirement for HEM1.
Yeah. Okay. So I think it was that, and then you were also going to refer to as part of the main module, we're also going to refer to the guidance on rollback as well. So making that clear in there. So so main mod criterion B, which would review both the marketing period, the guidance on alternative uses, and also the or clarity on alternative uses, and also the guidance on rollback, and include reference to that in there. I think that was all on HEM1, and then HEM2 was just greater clarity in criterion C regarding permitted development rights for changes of use within Class E. Yeah,
I think, Mike, there was just a further modification regarding the area of land. There was some discrepancy between
good point.
the
Thank
two.
you.
So
Yeah.
And I'm not sure whether it was we got to the bottom of it, but there was we talked about policy HOU3 and there are opportunities under that, and I think the council was going to have a look at that and look at the range of options
be made
for that
reference to in the policy. Yeah. I think you and I think you were keen that the opportunity wasn't limited to opportunities under HOU3. But yeah, some reference to HOU3. Yeah. I think once you put that into the action list and we've had another look at it, I think we can perhaps just be clearer on precisely what changes you look at there. Excuse me, that sounds a little bit fudged, but yes, it's actually quite a complex issue, which you're clearly aware of, and has just become apparent to us, I think, just how complex it is to get the balance right. So yeah, I think we've got the gist of the main mod that we're after, but if you put it into the action list, we'll have a close look at that and make sure it reflects what needs to be done. So okay, so we've got we can bring this session to a close. So I think we just wanted to check with you when you want to start up the session on the remaining herb policies. We've got an option to take a short break now between two sessions and kick off maybe in 15-20 minutes time and try and get as far as we can before 1 o'clock, or we could break now and come back. We'll break now for lunch and maybe come back at I don't know, 1:30, something like that. It's up to you as to how you want to play it, what other commitments you've got, but we're happy to take a short break now and carry on, or take a longer lunch break now. What do you want to do? Yeah.
I was leaning on my colleagues. There's more Toby and Kim who'll be leading on these aspects. So, but
okay.
I think we'd set aside the time for these hearing sessions. So
you're happy to carry on now with a short break, yeah?
I think so. Yes.
Okay, that's fine. Well, should we say what's reasonable? Should we say, well, it's nearly 5 past now. Should we break now? Exit this session and start the next session up in 10 minutes. Is that okay? Does that give us enough time? Yeah. Okay, so we'll start the next session at 15:15. Brilliant. Thank you so much for your help this morning. It's been good. Okay. All right. See you shortly.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Great, thank you.